Yeah.
Oh,
Okay, so
Part of
we
it.
are live now.
Where in India?
The eastern part.
I'm from Argentina. We have all the seasons up there.
Yes, true.
Yeah. It doesn't get too cold. It doesn't get too hot. We have one day that is like super hot, one day that is super cold, and the rest is like spring, and it's beautiful.
Nathan, where are you based now? You mentioned Amsterdam last time.
I lived in Amsterdam for 7 years, but now I've been in Singapore for like 4 years.
So you're in Singapore now?
Yeah.
Ah, okay, because I thought last time you said Amsterdam.
I think I mentioned it because we were talking about Europe.
Yeah.
And I said,
Okay.
when I live in Amsterdam, yeah.
Sorry, I missed the past tense.
Oh, maybe I missed it. I don't know.
So I'm the only one. So it's 1 p.m. for me at the moment.
Comfortable time. And now
Me-
here's evening, so we want to go
Yeah,
to,
so you're-
go to dinner. Yeah.
You're already tired.
Yeah.
Okay, so since it's time, shall we begin?
Yes, sure.
Okay, so let me start by introducing everyone today. So welcome everyone to this cross-cultural UX packed session. 3 of our seasoned UX experts will be talking about their experience and how they have tackled these UX problems over the years. Firstly, I will introduce Mr. Natan. So he's head of product design at AirAsia and believes in the fact that practice of good design can create a better, more inclusive, sustainable world. Then I would next like to introduce Sanchita. She leads UX research at Lazada, and like she also does some pro bono consulting and conducts workshops and also mentors students in various universities in Singapore. Aimilia is a senior product designer at LearnWords, the top all-in-one platform for creating and promoting and selling online courses. Her mission is to help create digital products and services that offer best possible user experience while taking into account the business goals and technical constraints. Welcome to the session, guys. Over to you, Nathan.
Hello, everyone. Welcome, ladies. A pleasure to meet you again. I'm really happy that we have this background because now I know which day is today. I always get it wrong. And I know it's Friday, so happy Friday, everyone. We had a conversation previously about research, and today we're going to try to talk about some of the some topics that we feel are really interesting. But please, if you're watching this and you have questions, send it over. Maybe we can address some of those during the conversations. Okay. Well, girls, both of you are experienced researchers. From different fields. You have different experiences. So maybe we can open up with a first question, given your backgrounds and experiences are different, and those differences. What can we talk about? What are the main challenges in the research field today, right? From your both perspectives. Aimilia, you wanna open up with some perspectives?
Thanks, Nathan. Hello, everybody, to our attendees, and many thanks to UXArmy, the whole team, for setting this up. It's been a pleasure and an honor at the same time. Thanks to Sanchita and to Nathan. Happy to be here. So like Nathan said, we'll try to talk about our experiences, share our experiences, and maybe give some takeaway messages at the end. So to answer your question, Nathan, my experience, I'm an ex-academic. I was working in the field of human-computer interaction. So I've done research in that that kind of research, if you like. And then I moved to industry, and my experience there is in startups. Startups with an international audience, so this is important to mention, meaning that you do have to take into consideration different cultures to the extent possible, because being in a startup, you have a lot of other factors that come into play.
Can I ask you something because you mentioned something really interesting, at least for me, that is, you come from academic background, and then you suddenly show up in the startup scene, right? How different is that academic experience in research and the research part in startups? Was it impactful for you? It was like,
we can have another webinar on that, because it's a huge topic.
Maybe just a few words.
A short
understand.
answer. If anybody wants to talk about this, if they're thinking about moving, just grab me later on LinkedIn or anywhere else, because it's a big move, but it's totally different. Totally different. It's like a different world. When you're in academia, you're in a bubble almost. And then you get into the real world, and everything you do has a huge impact on users, on revenue, on retention, on churn, on so it's very different, but it's a nice story, and I'd love to join a webinar on this maybe in the future.
Marcos, take a note. We'll do another one next year when we talk about that. Sanchita, you want to give a little bit of your brief background and also perspective? We're going to start talking about the perspective, both of you, the biggest challenges that we have today in research, right?
Yeah, so I think in terms of my background, I have been working in research for past 19 years and always been in market research and user research. I have worked in bigger corporations, agencies, or even small startups, where it was more like, it was actually developing an app just before I joined Lazada. So there, the challenges are very different in all these different scenarios. And I think one of the things in a bigger corporation, which we face nowadays, and even I think even agencies are facing that, is the democratization of research, of user research. So that is one of the challenges which people are talking about a lot. And yeah, so that's one of the main things. But the other part is bringing together so many types of data sources, because nowadays we have so many different data sources which we collect, and how to analyze those, how to bring together the insights from those so that we can make sense of everything at once. So those are two things perhaps which is something which every researcher is trying to tackle in some way or the other.
Can I ask you to explain briefly what you mean by democratizing research for people who's not familiar with the term?
Yeah, so in terms of democratizing, it's kind of where you are, like says, I mean, one thing is because there is a promotion of that you have to have empathy for the users. So a lot of people go out there and do some interviews, maybe with one person or two people, or perhaps people who they only know among their circle, and then come and write some insights from it, and think that that is actually reflective of the entire population of, say, a country like Philippines or Indonesia, where the population is huge. So that sometimes the insights are not that useful, because, or rather it is not correct, it may be biased. So how to differentiate between unbiased or a correct methodology, that is one thing which researchers struggle with to inform people. And the other part is like, say, even for surveys, because of SurveyMonkey, or even like certain companies have Qualtrics, which is like accessible for everyone to use. Especially in the, in what I've heard in the US and all. In here, it's more like SurveyMonkey, Alchemer and all. So people just go and do a few questions and do some surveys, and then is perhaps not writing the questionnaire properly, or writing, the scales are not unbiased. The way you ask the questions, the way you do the analysis, we all know that there is a lot of confirmation bias which you can bring in, right, when you are analyzing the data and all. So how you present the data, how you analyze the data is a lot dependent on the researchers, what they take, what they present, what they hide. So those are things which sometimes there are issues when everyone is trying to do research, especially people who are trying to evaluate their own product or service, because there is an inherent bias that time when you don't bring in a third-party evaluator. Yeah.
That comes from the domain knowledge that you already have, and
and also
the preconceptions. Yeah.
And also the third-party perspective is very, very objective, right? Because the moment you are evaluating your own product, you have some amount of bias towards it.
Okay, that's really interesting, and this perspective you develop by being in this different context, because right now you're working in Lazada is within the product. You're within the product, and you notice this when you're working in Lazada, or you knew this from before, and how you deal with it.
This is something which has come up, I think, in the past 5 years only. It was not so much relevant before, because the democratization has been promoted for a certain reason. It has actually been promoted for a good reason, so that everyone builds empathy. But sometimes there is some misuse of it also, right? So anything which you develop or anything you promote has some good things and bad. So that is one thing which a lot of, you attend any researchers gathering, you will hear about this as one of the major concerns which researchers are having these days.
I guess the industry reached, certain evolves into certain maturities, and then new challenges appear, on the horizon. Yeah.
So how sorry, Nathan, what are the ways to address this, Sanchita? So for example, in your company, are there any approaches, techniques that you follow?
Yeah. So usually what we are doing is of course, there is a limited amount of limited number of researchers. So you can't expect that their researchers will be doing all the research. And that's where DIT is coming up, right? That do it together. So, or do it with me, which they call it like DIWM, and all these like short forms have come up. So instead of, because DIY sometimes do not work very well. So that's when DIT comes in, wherein there is some amount of supervision by the researcher, but then most of the executional work is done by the ones who are not trained in research, which means that, say, for a questionnaire, they might draft the first level of questionnaire, the researcher goes and finalizes it. And then after it is, after the research is run, maybe there is some amount of basic reporting, which is done by the researcher, the main key findings. For details, the researcher might not be involved. They might give you only data like data tables or something which is easy to digest, dashboards, so that they can go and play with their own the dashboard or the data tables and learn more from it. So that's how we are also tackling it in Lazada. That is the first and initial part. That's the easier part. The more difficult part is to train people to that. This is how you read data. This is, this is how you should synthesize data. This is how you should write a questionnaire. This is a sample size below which you should not go with, or if you see any research, you should not look into that data as the full truths. Yeah. So that's the education part. We are working on that as well. That takes lot of time and effort, because that's a long process. Yeah.
What about you, Aimilia? You find a similar challenges over there?
Not really, because I think what Sanchita is describing is more happens more in bigger in bigger companies where there are clear roles and the whole departments, research departments that are whose objective is to do this thing, and they're trying to meet their objectives the best way they can. They hire people, and as I see, Sanchita also refers to more junior design researchers who need to be trained and so on. So in my experience, I haven't really encountered this problem. Up till now, I've been the only, in the companies that I've worked in, I've been the only researcher. So that's both good and bad.
I guess.
Because everything has to go through me, but also there are very few things one can do, actually. So
Yeah.
there has to be very, very strict prioritization based on resources and so many other factors that I'm sure people can relate to in smaller companies. But I really find it very interesting what Sanchita is saying, and I would like to learn more about how you combine techniques in order to reach more representative results, and how do you even deeper on a technique combination level, how you address this problem.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Even the concept of bringing data from different sources, right? How you create an amalgam of insights from different data sources, and how you treat each data source, right? So in a smaller context where you're basically the main researcher, the main field worker, let's say in this case.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think are the challenges that you're facing right now that other people working alone can relate to?
Well, if you remove factors like resources and time and things like that, but I think an interesting problem that from what I read across and what I hear other colleagues in other companies is recruiting users, participants for studies. Something that I've been doing personally is that I try to develop a relationship with the product's current users. So this is one pool that I try to have near me and have access to. This is through, of course, really good customer support, customer success. These departments are very, very important, and so their success is really important to me too. How well they do their job. Insights as well, customer insights. So those are departments that I work closely with, and I get data from, and I exchange, do knowledge sharing and so on. But recruiting users is a problem, especially if if your product has an international audience, because you need a good sample. Like we said, cultural differences. It's important to get a representative sample of, if your product operates around the world, you shouldn't just focus on one part, because then you're going to be biased and you're going to serve those people more. So it's a real challenge to find participants for studies, generally speaking, whether moderated or not, or unmoderated. Tools like UXArmy are really, really helpful in this aspect. So I've been using in the past and currently various tools to help in this respect.
So when you talk about the other departments that you collaborate, they were part also of your research operation workflow, and how would you contribute with these teams?
I don't have a strict process, but I have an open communication channel. So because there's a lot of data coming in, that they have a lot of knowledge, and it's it's only to everyone's benefit that this knowledge is spread and everyone has access to it. This is another challenge actually that I've noticed lately. How do you have this research knowledge easily accessible to everybody?
Totally. Yeah, I'm having the same challenge. Like, we're a pretty organized team, and knowledge sharing is definitely a challenge.
Okay, yeah.
You mentioned something really interesting about the international audience that your product has, right? And there's definitely, I also work for a company that has an international audience, and Sanchita as well. So maybe we can talk a little bit about that, like how do we handle certain situations, or some stories that we have that might help people, sort some of the problems that are around, the cultural and language barriers that we found, right?
Sanchita can go first.
Yeah. So we are, of course, based in a very, very heterogeneous market, which means that there are different languages, different cultures, different religions. So we have to be very mindful about how we not only have questionnaires or have studies in the local language, but also how we localize the questions so that it is exactly user-friendly, what the local language is for that particular, it's just not translations, but localization of each and every term. Also, we were, yes, in fact, just yesterday we were discussing about how the gender question also changes from each country to country, how somebody might take a male female, or some countries might be male female others, or some countries would not like others, it would be something else. So these are small nuances which you have to keep in mind when you're working in across different countries. So that's of course always there. In fact, I was talking about the other day that how by mistake a survey we had designed for Thailand in English, because the initial survey is always designed in English. And then we had sent it out for translation, but the person who was sending it out, somehow there was some miscommunication. The person didn't realize it would go on Monday. She sent it out on a Friday to get more response rate. But then what eventually happened is, our surveys typically end up getting like it's sent out to a volume of like 200,000, 300,000 minimum, right? Because it's sent out through the app. And that's at least we send it out to so many people, and only 10 people took that survey in Thailand. It's not like Thailand people do not speak English, but they just have, when they see a survey, they expect it to be in the Thai language. So there is that aversion, so local language. So that part, yeah, we had to redo the survey, obviously resend it on the next week, but that's something which, and that's, I think Aimilia will also face when she is doing it across different countries.
Yeah, that's, I would face that. I mean, what I would say on this is that it's definitely a problem that I have in mind, but I don't have the luxury to tackle this problem. So for example, I don't have the resources to translate surveys. But I would rely on tools like UXArmy, perhaps, to bring certain audiences closer to me that I would otherwise not have access to. When it comes to localization, obviously, yeah, we all know that there are cultural differences, like you said, behaviors. I mean, how expressive some people are, some countries are, how confrontational they are, etc., etc. So yes, we face that, and it's a constant struggle. That's all I have to say. We do the best we can under the circumstances, and yeah, I mean, there have to be. I guess this is an area that could use some solutions.
Yeah.
Sorry, Sanchita, go ahead.
Yeah, I would like to add also that it's not just like language barriers, but also the personalities of the different countries. Like we all know that countries like Indonesia, Philippines has very positive bias. That anything you ask them, they will be super excited. They will always say, "Yeah, very satisfied," right? Which we call as top boxing in research. That everything is like, yes, I'm very happy with it. Only with all the probing techniques, projective techniques, with all the different techniques in which we use in qualitative research, that you can go dive deeper and finally find out that no, they are not very happy about it. And in fact, we have had cases in Indonesia where they have told us that why don't you do a refund? Why don't you apply for a refund and get or return a product? And they said, oh, I just want to be polite because I don't want to. So imagine they are being polite with a company, not even with a person. So they just don't want to. So that's a kind of a personality differences which we get. So in fact, I worked across multiple countries, and I've noticed that when I was like working for markets like Australia, which is a very heavily researched market, meaning there have been studies done for so many years now. So they are extremely saturated and surveys or receiving in phone calls or surveys online and all for interviews. So for them, they're very open. They always give you proper feedback, but they're very particular about time, which means you say 1 hour, you book 1 hour, 1 hour sharp, they will tell you, hey, it's 1 hour, I'm gone. But so when it comes to Saudi Arabia, they will not open up initially. They are a bit apprehensive. What is this survey? What do you mean? Are you trying to sell me something? But once they get that kind of trust from you, then they will go on talking with you to the extent that, how a lot of our interviewers and all have quotas, right? They are paid for each interview, and they are like, can you stop? Because I'm not getting paid for this time. Similarly, in Indonesia, Malaysia, and these countries over here, people are very apprehensive, which means that it takes a lot of time to get them to open up initially or even attend an interview, especially countries like Thailand, Malaysia, where there have been new privacy laws which have been brought in, like something which is equivalent to GDPR. Especially Thailand has even more stricter policy now than what we have in Singapore in terms of privacy policy. So these countries, because of the education from the government about privacy policies, they have become very, very concerned about their privacy, and should I get, maybe I'm getting scammed. So they will ask for certain proofs, in fact, that this is actually a project from Lazada, and they will get paid at the end of the interview because if there is incentive. So all these things. So there are all these different kind of, in Asia itself, we see very different personalities. I'm sure in Europe or US also there will be different types. Yeah.
Well, I think there's definitely archetypes for sure. Yeah. But these two things that you mentioned for me are always fascinating. And I can separate it in two things, right? One is the personality of the participant, and another thing is the maturity and his understanding of what's going on, right? Like if it's tech savvy, if it's like research savvy. He already knows how it goes and he has certain experience. So I think there's two things that we can share from our perspective that happen often in any culture, actually, that you have more or less of these things. How will you handle someone who doesn't open up during the interview or the research? And how will you handle the opposite, like somebody who's like too much, like he's there with the finger, pushing the buttons, and you already know that he knows what he's doing, and he's over suggesting and he's overdoing it, right? How will you handle these two different personas during the interview?
So Aimilia, would you like to go, or I can? So usually we go
Yeah,
for
go ahead.
personalities. Yeah. So we recruit beforehand. We know that we want a few tech savvy users, and a few, like, depends on actually the product we are testing. Also, say if it's a new user product, we will obviously go for somebody who is not at all tech savvy, because the tech savvy person can anyway get through it. If it's a very advanced product, like something which maybe games, right, which perhaps only the young people or ones who are at least casual gamers will use, so then we will typically recruit the respondent for the interview. Sometimes there will be a mix as well. There will be mix in a lot of cases, and that's how then we try to see what did they say versus what did they say, and what are the similarities, what are the differences, etc.
I'm wondering, Aimilia, if you have any input on this, and I also have an extra question for later.
Yeah, what I would say is that, like Sanchita said, it depends on the product. But generally, in my experience, I try to have a balanced sample. So yes, I would, recruit some novice users, and then on the other edge, I would recruit some power users to give me a different kind of feedback on whatever it is I'm testing or researching. Because at the end of the day, in order for you to recruit them, that means that they are part of your target audience. So you did some screening, and it's possible that a novice user will have those characteristics, and your product will need to be ready for that and will need to perform. But then again, the power user is also a probable case. So your product has to address that type of, their needs and their pain points or their expectations. They'll need a faster response, they'll need shortcuts, and so on and so forth. So you need a balance. Obviously, when you during the actual sessions, there might be some difficulty, but I think you get over that with experience. You find ways to either slow the power user down a bit and just get to the points that really are important for you to find out, and then the novice you would handle in a different way, be more encouraging, and make them feel like they're great, they're doing fine, you're just here to learn, and they can be open about how they feel and being honest and so on.
Yeah.
So my follow-up to this, because for me it's fascinating, you meet all these people and then you interact with all these people, you collect all these insights. There's a lot of criteria and filtering happening there. And then there's a bunch of other criteria being applied when you do synthesis and you prepare the observations that you made during those sessions. And then you need to communicate that. So it's a funnel that is pretty complex. It's a pretty complex process, right? So I'm wondering, would you recommend, I guess obviously there's scenarios, right? But in general, would you recommend to average all these insights? Or because I'm doing something right now with my team and I'm sort of validating that is the right thing to do. Live, I'm validating live, right, with two experts, right? I'm going to tell you what we're doing instead of like formulating a question that is sort of tricky. What we're trying to do is, when we get all this information, what we're trying to do is communicate that information through the persona model or the persona method, right? So we try to do is like, okay, people who's tech savvy will land into this persona, and people who's less, novice will land into this other persona. And then we tell a different story for each one of them. And we talk about their expectations in a separate, like in a separate story, in a separate funnel, in a separate journey, sort of saying, right? Would you find the need to do this as well, or is there there's other ways when you communicate these findings, right? I don't know if I complicated the question.
No.
Did I complicate the question? Is it clear?
Yes.
I think the audience didn't understood anything that I said, but if you want to clarify it for them.
No, of course, always. Now, results can be communicated in many ways. Of course, at an overall level, there is a need for an overall level, right? Because some of them, because whenever we do a report, what I always tell my team is that make it for 3 different types of users. One is very top level, which means that one slide only. They will not go through one more slide. So that one slide should have whatever you need to talk about from that report. And then you have a few slides, which is more like an executive summary, which is something which other teams who are interested, or other people who are not directly interested in that product, but is interested in insights, can go through. So that is the other one. And then, of course, for the actual team, they can go through all the detailed findings, which is the last half of the report, actually. So yes, in that way, we will always do analysis by like all the different types. Now, it may be tech savvy versus non-tech savvy. It can be even like for our case, we also have like the personas are based on psychographics. So we have done segmentation, which is basically user segmentation based on using factor and cluster analysis, the typical way how you do it. But it's not just based on demographics, or it's not just based on the usage life cycle. It's also implements the psychographics of the people. So every study we do, we implement that, which means that we'll ask a few questions where we can figure out that these are the segments, and we do analysis by those segments for any research that we do. Yes, and I think that's very important as well, because there will be some
differences, right?
Yes.
Difference between the segments. So yeah, we base our segments or personas in behavior. We look at the behaviors. We don't look at the demographics. Demographics are sort of a decoration for the storytelling part, right? It's not the basis of
behavior and
the segmentation.
And psychographics as well, yes.
Do you have any other technique that you want to share? Maybe you want to come and see how we do it, and then you give me some feedback. Aimilia, sorry. Go ahead.
If I may add just a bit of a different perspective. I totally agree with everything said, that depending on who is going to be in the audience when you're presenting, if you're presenting findings, that means that you need to present in a different way, because at the end of the day, what you want to achieve is for your findings to have an impact and to lead to some change that will ultimately improve the user experience. So that's the ultimate goal of presenting findings to stakeholders or whoever it is. So what I would just add is that in smaller companies, I've experienced that giving presenting findings in a way that makes the return on investment a bit more obvious is also beneficial. So it's not obvious to everybody. Presenting a finding doesn't necessarily mean much to everyone. I mean, but if you explain that that particular problem that we discovered has this impact on user experience and might lead to these problems, and if we fix it, we'll probably improve retention, will decrease the customer support tickets with respect to ta-ta-tam. So if you know, phrase it in that sort of way, I've seen that it is beneficial. So I just wanted to add that.
No, that's great. I mean, there's a question from the audience about specifically that, like, what are best practices or rituals when you present research reports? And I think we had a really good answer if we collect all the ideas together, right? You present, depending on who's the audience, is the message that you present and the data that you present. Sanchita talks about 3 levels, you know, one deck, some overview, or the full report, and then the metrics part that I think is incredibly valuable. And I can ask you a couple questions about that if you don't mind. But the important thing is like communicating the ROI, right? We're doing this research. These are the insights, and this is the impact, right? This is when we say impact, we can translate into this is the return of investment of doing all these things, right? Increase retention or whatever is the KPI or specific metric that we look at, right? So the question is about the practices, and I think these practices are really good. And the rituals, do we do something specific when we present the reports to specific audiences? I have my rituals because I have a background in design. I do a lot of paraphernalia with the deck, like things are moving and like numbers appears like this, and it's pretty. I put a lot of aesthetics and motion to it because I want to, you know, people to pay attention to specific things, right? Do you girls have any of that you do while you know, like a good tips or practice when you are presenting a report? Aimilia, do you have any of those things?
Well, now that you described yours, I do actually, and I've seen that it's really impactful. Some problems that for me are, you know, we discover, let's say for example, we discover some problems in research and they're really mind-blowing for me. So, you know, doesn't mean they're mind-blowing for everyone, but they're really mind-blowing. I borrow a session recording from one of the research tools that we have running, because that's very, it gives you such a different perspective to see an actual customer using your product and making XYZ mistake.
Yeah, that's a moment of total empathy, right?
It's great. It's great. I do employ that technique, not
and you put the video
all the time, but just a clip, not the whole session, but just the little part that demonstrates what I'm trying to, what I just said a moment ago.
Yeah, same here. We do put in videos. The reason is because if we, of course, it's not possible for quantitative studies. And then we have to, that's why in quantitative, what we do is we share directly the raw data and the dashboard so that people don't question. Like, you know, because I have heard this statement a lot of times. Sanchita said this. Sanchita's report, it is said like that. But the moment you have people seeing these videos, it's like, oh, the user was saying this. So the whole, you know, the way they term it itself changes. That empathy, you can see that empathy right on the spot, the way they term the...
Putting from the video and like,
yes,
wetting everything.
It's the same video you analyze and you put it into words or you put it into your own findings. It's like Sanchita said this about this thing, but the moment you put the video, it's like oh, I heard the user was saying this. So that's actually one of the best ways to build empathy. I agree with Aimilia. We do include that as well. Yes.
Yeah, that's actually probably that's one of the most impactful things that you can put in a presentation, right? I think between that and ROI things, KPIs and metrics, those two things are probably the best things that you can do to actually create a really impactful presentation. Now,
also we add, because we have a lot of BI data, of course. So what we do is not every research question will have a BI data associated with it, because it shouldn't actually. Then why are you even doing the research in the first place? You could have just used BI data, but there will be certain questions which you can match with BI data to an extent or fully. So we bring up BI data to show that, yes, see, this is what our data is saying, and this is also what BI is saying. So then you can trust the rest of the research as well. So that is about building trust among people who are, especially if you're saying something negative about a particular product or and to the person who has developed it. That's very crucial that you develop that trust.
So that's what you meant at the beginning when you're talking about multiple sources of data, right?
Right.
Yeah. So the business intelligence data is something that your team itself can do, or is something that you need to interact with other teams?
We can. In some cases, we can extract data ourselves. In some cases, we cannot, meaning that there is a lot of, because you know how in bigger organizations, there's like only this part of the data is accessible to you. This part is by somebody else. Like there's a lot of restrictions. So yes, we get it from the business intelligence team. We also take, say, research from different other previous research or from other teams have done it. So we take all these data and we try to see, we actually send out a message whenever we do a major research that, hey, have anyone else done similar kind of research on a similar topic? Then we take those research, read through it, and we see, okay, these are things which are matching up, or these are things which are contradictory, then we should do further research on this. So, and then we present it actually within the research. So our research report, maybe it's a whole qualitative report, but then in between you will find a lot of quantitative data coming up. That's because it's from other data sources, and we mentioned that this is from the other data sources.
So you start threading all the qualitative with quantitative to make the message a little stronger, right? And build that trust that you were mentioning.
Yes.
That sounds incredible.
Yeah.
I wish I can call the BI team and say, hey guys, you know what?
No, that's a long process. We start, like the moment we are starting planning the research, we already start planning our report, because we know we'll need it after 1 month or so. Yeah.
So basically, you from your hypothesis, you already connect with the teams and you say, oh, we're going to be doing this study. This is sort of like some metrics or dimensions that we need to understand. And
Yeah.
then when that comes in and the qualitative thing comes in, then you merge, put together. Okay. Yeah, that's great. Before I move to a follow-up question that I have, I wanna send a personal message. Esther, are you listening? You heard the video part? You know, we talked about this before. Or we'll talk later. Okay. Now we can continue.
Okay.
So what I'm wondering now is, we talk about the content of the report. We talk about how structuring and creating trust in the data. We talk about important things like ROI. We talk about all these things, and the audience, that is really important, whom are you talking to, and the videos, the clips, that's really important, right? Now, while we're showing all this data, for me as a designer, something really important is the storytelling, right? So the storytelling is, you have the information that you want to show, but then you need to interact with people and make them, hey guys, this is important. Like, do you have any tips while you're talking about the presentation, while you're talking about the reports, while you're talking about the insights? Do you do something else, or it's just like yourself? Do you have any advice on the prestige, acting, or mimicking or moving your hands like I do all the time, right? Do you do any of those things?
Okay, so there are different ways of presenting, I think, because it depends on your audience as well. Like some audience, they prefer the storytelling method. Some audience, they just prefer answer telling, which we call it answer telling, meaning I have these 5 questions. Can you answer these 5? I don't, and it may not tie up into an exact story. I try to build a story all the time so that it sounds convincing. And I always say, as you have seen in the previous slides, or as we will be seeing in the next few slides, like that, to at least build that connection between the slides. And then there are some teams who prefer workshops. meaning that you present and then you start dissecting it, start brainstorming it with Miro boards. So Miro boards is heavily used by the teams who want to do any kind of brainstorming. So yes, so there are depends on the audience and what they prefer. What because as you know, our like in my company, I'm like interacting with some of them who were perhaps doing research in US and Europe before. Some of them in Southeast Asia. Some of them are based in China, where there is a complete language barrier as well, with me talking to them in English and they might not get everything. Yeah, so
Sorry.
yeah, so it depends on this thing. And then yes, we do use storytelling, or at least in the overall format as well. Yes.
Aimilia, do you have any tricks like Meryl Streep style? You raise your voice, you use your hands, anything
Used
like
to do that earlier, but not anymore.
What I would add is that I also I like to do my homework before any presentation. So I really study the audience, who's going to be there, what do they expect out of this presentation, what's important for them as a takeaway message. So I will try to build the whole presentation having these things in mind. While presenting, I would add that it depends on whether you're in a remote only context, because it's totally different. So imagine you don't have eye contact with, say, 30 people in a Zoom call. If I were presenting in a conference room, it would be different. So there are differences there. You need to keep it's more difficult to keep the audience's attention if you're on a Zoom call or remotely presenting remotely. This is a challenge. I mean, even if you do what you say, Nathan, probably people won't be looking at your hands. So it's a matter of your voice, and it's a matter of phrasing, putting it all together in a nice story, bits, chunks of information, not blah blah blah, talking and talking. That's what I would add to what Sanchita already said, actually.
Before we open the floor for questions, we touch upon a lot of really interesting topics, and we weave around something that for me is important, and it's probably one of my biggest responsibilities, that is developing and building a research culture, and all the things that entitle building a culture of research. And I feel here we have really good examples of, in a small context and a big context, how or what are the things that we aim to do in day-to-day to bring a little bit more awareness of, the importance of research. And I have specific questions, but Aimilia, can you help me understand, what are those little things that you do in your own context to bring this awareness, or to bring people into the importance of understanding the importance of the work that we do?
Thanks for the question. I mean, I'm sure everyone agrees that this is a big challenge.
Oh, definitely.
Especially in smaller tech companies. But what I try to do is we try to have a design team that every individual acts as an advocate. So that's my approach. Every design team member, knows and feels the benefits and the value and the ROI of doing user research, and the benefits of good design in general. And these individuals, because they operate perhaps in different teams here and there in different projects around the company, they act as advocates. So I feel that slowly, if you inject that kind of voice in parts of the organization, that the benefits will show, and slowly people will, start to get on board and to, of course, you need to present, evidence of why this is important. But I think that the first part, where you have the advocates talking about the benefits and the value, is really nice, and it works well.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I think it's important, and there's no, if you're in that context, small company, and you're doing all the effort, you probably need to have that advocate program, undercover program, who's like getting people into helping you out. We're close to the end. So before, Sanchita, if you don't mind, I have a related question that is actually probably is from the audience, and it's probably relevant for you, right? The question goes, how do you educate new user researchers in your team, right? This person switched to a UX role 2 months back in Malaysia. So if you have any tips on, how do you develop new user researchers?
Yeah, so I think mostly, okay, so I started with research long ago, but even then, usually if somebody is a new user researcher, it's very important that for the first 1 or 2 projects, they are assisting somebody else so that they observe and they learn. Because if they are just doing it on their own, then it's very difficult for them to learn anything new. And I know it's very difficult because a lot of companies, especially smaller tech companies, have only one researcher, which means that I have interviewed many candidates who have told me that they never had anyone to look up to. They never had anyone to learn from. And how did they manage? Of course, I'm not talking about our company, because we have experienced researchers that they can learn from. So typically, I've realized that how do they learn from is just attending a lot of webinars, attending a lot of free courses. That's how they are learning new research. And that's the only way, perhaps, in the smaller companies where there is only 1 or 2 researchers and they don't have much of learnings from other senior researchers to do. But in terms of training, if you already have an established team and a new person comes on board, the very basics of teaching them is not with writing reports and all, but rather about what will make your questionnaire be unbiased. How do you recruit respondents who are the sampling, there's no sampling error or non-sampling error, as we call these kind of things. How do you use some projective techniques or some techniques to write a particular qualitative discussion guide? So these are areas which they should be focusing more on rather than the analysis, because the analysis is the more difficult part. But if you don't even do the questionnaire right or the discussion guide right, as I always say, garbage in, garbage out. So that part is always very important, and that's where they should start, and that's what they should learn. I think that's the initial learning phase. Yeah.
I have a question for Aimilia, specifically for when you're doing user research, user interviews. How do you manage if most participants are not available during office hours, right? How will you handle that situation?
I work out of office hours
because
you need that data. There's no other way. That's the truth.
Now I have a question for you, like, kind of person. Does that happen often to you?
Well, we don't do, personally speaking, we don't do that type of research every day, every week. So it doesn't happen that often. It's manageable. It's not that bad.
Sanchita, you were adding something. Sorry.
Yeah, I think that's something which you have you get accustomed to, because you know that the best time to do research is evenings or Saturdays, right? Saturdays or Sundays, because that's when everyone is available. So if you really want a group of people, especially if you're doing a group discussion of sector, you definitely need to do it on a Saturday. Yeah, what I do is I tell my team, if you worked on a Saturday or on a thing, then you can take a in lieu of holiday. That's how I manage it.
How do you? Okay. We'll talk about this offline.
Yeah.
So there's a good question for Sanjay about how many iterations you guys do for any design, and how do you decide that it's enough and you don't need more iterations? I have a short answer, but I'll leave you. Aimilia, you wanna give your point on this?
It totally depends on the feature.
Yeah, I agree.
If it's just a matter of, adding a couple of fields in a form, then that's totally different than adding a totally new feature to the whole tool. So there's a different approach you would follow, and the process is much longer in the second case rather than the first.
Sanchita, you mind if I add a nugget here?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, I think you do as many iterations. Of course, the context, as Aimilia said, is different for each thing, but I will say you do as many iterations as you think you manage to achieve the success that you plan to have, right? When you think of a design, you need to have a really clear factor or criteria of success. So when you see that you're approaching that criteria, it's time to move to the next thing. Otherwise, you can iterate forever. Design is never known, right? Okay.
We have also had cases where we had to completely scratch that project and then restart.
Yeah. They're telling me that we'll probably need to wrap it up at 8 p.m. Is that because we have a limitation on the contract with Zoom, or is it because people you want to stay and keep talking about this thing? We can wrap it up. I mean, it's fine. We have a few more questions, but maybe we can do one more. Is that possible?
Yeah, sure.
One more? Okay. So there's one that is a bit difficult, more complex, that has to do with handling or managing stakeholders. What happens, for stakeholders whom you don't interact much, you don't know well? What are some methods that you use to understand their expectations, and what they feel? What are the things that they feel are important, right? To have really good understanding of those things. It's difficult, right?
Well, you might not know them personally, but I think you would at least know their role. So their role in the organization. So that's, I think, one place to look for signs of what their expectations are. But yeah, you're always going to be prepared for surprises. You might not get it right. You might get people who are confrontational and not, want to accept what you're presenting. These are part of the job, I think, and you should just be calm and be prepared to answer questions in the best way you can. Sanchita?
Maybe buy him a beer, have like a conversation outside the professional thing, build a relationship, I guess.
Yes, I think build a relationship. And of course, one of the things is that if you prove your expertise, which, like I joined when I joined Lazada, I think Natan is very much aware because Natan was there that time in Lazada. So, we were trying to build up this research practice for the first time in the product team. We faced a lot of challenges from existing researchers in other teams who were perhaps doing it, and then so challenges are there, either whether it's convincing the end stakeholder or other people. And that takes time. One is, of course, building your reputation of research expertise, and two is to build that connection with them. Maybe speak to them separately on a one-on-one, maybe just even a call, because we are in Singapore, we can't even perhaps go and meet people all the time. Most of the time, there's so much restrictions. So just call them up and say, hey, I wanted to understand, what are the challenges you're facing, so that I can, make the report accordingly. And they automatically warm up to you, they speak to you, and they even tell you, actually, I was looking for this, and, I'm having this challenge, and the designer says this, but the PD is saying this, and I want to see which one is the better option. So things like these will come up with, usually people will never put it in written. So when you speak to them on a call, because that's why I say always pick up the phone and speak to the person. There's many things which the person will tell you, and that automatically warms you up to the
personal touch.
Yeah, the personal touch. Yeah.
Okay, I think we can wrap it up. I had a lot of fun today. Thank you very much for having this conversation with me. And I think it's time to say goodbye. There's one more question that I see Sanchita is typing the answer right now. So we can say goodbye, I guess.
Yeah. Thank you, Nathan. Thank you, Aimilia. Thank you, Sanchita. It was a great session. And thank you everyone for joining.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone.
See you soon. Until next time.
Bye. Have a nice weekend, everyone.